As President Trump continues to fight the election outcome, officials in New York have ramped up investigations into his business dealings. Among other issues, prosecutors are looking into tax write-offs on millions of dollars in consulting fees for his daughter, Ivanka Trump. In fact, Mr. Trump faces a long list of legal challenges when he leaves office in January and transitions back into private life. For more on this, let's bring in CBS News legal contributor Rebecca Roiphe. Rebecca, always good to have you on the show. We've never really seen anything like this before. So even before getting into the specifics of these different investigations, I'd just like you to start off by informing our viewers about what's going on here.
Well, the president has enjoyed a kind of immunity from being in office, and that immunity is soon to drop away. And the question of the extent and scope of that immunity has been the subject of a number of proceedings, but we're about to see what happens when he's no longer president and subject to these legal battles without the protection and without the power of the government behind him.
All right, so let's dig in on some of them. How about starting with Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance? His office is trying to get President Trump's tax returns to look into his business dealings. Where does that investigation stand?
So it looks like Cy Vance is poised to get those tax returns. And while we don't know exactly what he's investigating because the grand jury is secret, we've had some clues. And it looks like his investigation is going beyond those hush money payments that were used to pay off Stormy Daniels and prevent her from coming forward. If you remember, Michael Cohen, the president's former attorney, was charged with those campaign finance crimes, and the president was named as individual one in that indictment in the Southern District of New York. Of course, he could face criminal prosecution for that. However, I think that's highly unlikely. The question then remains whether New York will be pursuing that, and more importantly, pursuing broader questions about conduct that he engaged in and his organization engaged in before he became president. As you mentioned, tax fraud, bank fraud, insurance fraud, all of those are possibilities. And looking at clues from what we've gotten in public record, we can see that Cy Vance may very well be interested in pursuing those after he leaves office.
New York State Attorney General Letitia James is investigating the Trump Organization for possible civil financial misbehavior. What type of fallout is the president facing in that particular probe?
So again, there's a parallel civil probe into the Trump Organization and potential tax liability, tax crimes or tax evasion that he's engaged in, and we don't know whether that conduct has actually happened or whether she'll be able to prove it. One thing that's important to note about the New York State Attorney General's investigation is that, well, Letitia James campaigned, when she campaigned for Attorney General of New York, she campaigned on this very inappropriate line, which is she said that she was going to go after Donald Trump. And we have, in democracy, it is very important that we don't use the power of government to pursue our political adversaries by suggesting that she had that axe to grind before she entered office. It cast a shadow on her investigation and arguably even on Cy Vance's. So the president has repeatedly said, these are political witch hunts. There's nothing there. If they go after me, it's only because they don't like me politically and I'm some kind of an adversary. Now, I certainly do not think that's true. I especially do not think it's true of the Manhattan District Attorney's Office investigation. But she has lent some credibility, or at least the appearance of credibility, to those allegations by her inappropriate actions when she was campaigning for office. So while there's no reason to think that her investigation is anything but proper, she has cast doubt on that and made it harder for the state officials here to pursue any criminal or civil liability that the president might have after he leaves office.
I'm really glad that you brought that up. I was going to ask you about that very question. But in addition to those investigations into the president's business dealings, the president's also dealing with several civil suits. Two women who accused him of sexual assault are now suing him for defamation after he called them liars. And his niece, Mary Trump, says that she was cheated out of inheritance money. Are those civil cases perhaps even a greater threat to Mr. Trump after he leaves office?
Well, I don't know if they're a greater threat, but it certainly seems like those will proceed. And while he hasn't really been able to exactly shut them down, he's been able to delay significantly. And he's had at his fingertips the power of the government. He's had a team of government lawyers, and he's also had the Department of Justice in various different suits at least attempt to intervene. This has created a great deal of delay in these cases, and that's worked in his favor thus far. I think that going forward, he will not be able to do that anymore, and the depositions will be forthcoming. The thing about civil discovery is a lot of information comes out, and if you make allegations or you're defending against allegations, a lot of unpleasant information can come out. So I think those are certainly there, and they are a threat. I don't think they're as large a threat as the criminal liability coming from the Manhattan DA's office, but there's certainly something that he's going to have to face, and it's going to be a long, drawn-out, expensive, and time-consuming battle.
At the very top line, are we likely to see President Trump in court for any of these cases, Rebecca?
I wouldn't think we would very soon, but we might. That's the thing. I think it's impossible to know because we can't see behind the curtain, so we don't know what evidence there is. And, if I were Cy Vance, because of the questions I mentioned before, the concern that this not appear remotely political, but rather appear like a straightforward criminal case holding somebody responsible for his acts. In order to do that, his evidence has to be ironclad. And I think that's the main thing, to thread this needle so that you are holding people responsible, you're standing for the principle that no man is above the law, while still preserving the legitimacy of the criminal justice system. If it appears as if this investigation is political, it not only undermines this investigation, but it casts doubt on the criminal justice system as a whole and can cause severe damage, and damage really to democracy itself. So it's extremely important that if he brings these cases, he has very strong proof. And it's hard to have very strong proof in a case like this, even when crimes have been committed, in part because you need to prove intent. And while you can prove a case with documents, you don't need to have cooperation. You don't need to have people within the organization come help you prove your case, because sometimes you just have documents. But the question of proving fraud involves fraudulent intent. There has to be something there that suggests that the president, if he is charged, or any of his associates, if they are charged, intended this fraud. And in these sorts of cases, that's hard to prove in a run-of-the-mill case. And as I said, since I don't think they will really pursue this unless they have overwhelming proof, it's much harder to have overwhelming proof. So my guess is it will be a long time before he, if he does, before he is, brought into court or arrested, arraigned on these charges. But the civil cases might move a little bit faster since they have already been underway. And I think some of these legal battles he's been able to delay, but won't be able to do so quite as much anymore.
All right, Rebecca Roiphe, thank you.
Thank you so much.